We are all ordinary people, and most of us have to rent a house when we go out, but do you know the taboos of renting a house? Do you know which rooms can be rented and which rooms cannot be rented? Some rents are paid, which can make you lucky and everything goes well. And some rented houses will bring you not only bad luck, but even death. My name is Jean Fei. I'm 22 this year. I just graduated from university. I work as an apprentice in an advertising company. As a newcomer to society like me, there is nothing to ask for. It is better to work honestly for a few months and learn something before talking. Due to the limited economy, I rented a single room near the company. Although the lighting in this single room is not good, it is dark and even gloomy, but it is cheap. That day was the same as usual. I went out to go to work, and the moment the door was closed, I was taken aback by the sudden coldness, and I saw black handprints on the door. Damn, who the hell is so wicked? I cursed a few times, really a little angry. If it is a bare child, I have nothing to say, but a child can't reach such a height. Forget it, talk to the landlady about it tonight. Unfortunately, I accidentally ran into an old man on the way to work. Fortunately, the old man didn't blackmail me, just said some inexplicable things. When I came to the company, my master had already arrived and was tinkering with some inkjet printers. My master is 1 year older than me, and he looks quite honest, but his character is bad, and he always likes to talk nonsense in a serious manner. Other colleagues also came after a while. They were quite busy, and the whole morning passed without realizing it. It's time for dinner, and the master and I stayed to watch the company, and the others went to eat. Just after everyone left, the master answered a phone call and trotted downstairs. I was the only one left on the second floor. Not long after the master went down, the sound of kicking and kicking footsteps sounded from the stairwell. I turned around and saw the proprietress walking over. Our proprietress is very beautiful, with big eyes, oval face, and that waist is definitely the A4 waist that is popular now. Although she no longer looks like a 17 or 18-year-old girl, she has the smell of a mature woman, which has a special flavor. But I don't dare to have any unreasonable thoughts about this proprietress. It's not that I'm afraid of the boss, but because of the cold aura on this proprietress, which makes people dare not approach her. But didn't the proprietress just go down for dinner? Why did you come back so soon? The proprietress took a look at me and told me to go to the hotel to find her at night. Hotel? I was stunned for a while, and it took me a long time to react. I was about to say something, but found that the proprietress had disappeared. I scratched my head, feeling cloudy. Is the proprietress asking me to go to the hotel? What does it mean? What do you want to do again? As a man, faced with an invitation from a beautiful woman, he had to think about it. After a while, the master came up, looking a little absent-minded. I would like to take this opportunity to find out what kind of person the proprietress is. I whispered, Master, did the lady boss say you will work overtime today? Madam Boss? The master glanced at me, his expression was not very good, and he lowered his voice. What nonsense are you talking about? The lady boss died half a year ago. Where is the lady boss? Died? There was a bang in my mind and it went blank. So who is the beautiful woman who gets along with the boss day and night these days? So many people have seen it. I smiled and said, Master, what are you kidding? The master said, who was kidding you? I also said that the proprietress has not been there all the time these days. Everyone has seen it. Then he described the dress of the proprietress and what happened in the past few days. After the master listened, he widened his eyes and said, you won't bump into ghosts, right? Then I showed me a piece of news, which was 3 months ago, saying that a certain woman died strangely in a certain rental house, and there was a photo attached, and the woman in the photo was exactly the same as the proprietress. I just felt my scalp tingling for a while. The news can't be faked, unless it's done on purpose and then shown to me, but even if the master knows how to do it, he won't know that I'm going to mention the matter of the proprietress. If you say that the master and the others are messing with me, the situation is too big. I would rather believe that I was dazzled or saw ghosts in broad daylight. I came back to my senses. Did I really see a ghost? But when I think about it, I feel that this matter is a bit nonsense. These days, where the hell is it? Maybe it's just the resemblance between the two, but how can I explain the fact that I saw the proprietress in the past few days? I can't think clearly about this matter, so I don't think about it too much. As for that, I dare not go to the hotel at night, because I am afraid that if something happens, then I will be finished. Just when I was about to look away, I suddenly discovered that the place where the woman hanged herself in the news turned out to be the room where I lived. That startled glance made me break out in a cold sweat, and I felt bad all over. When the others came back after eating, the master left beforehand, and I went to eat by myself. I found a random noodle shop, ordered a bowl of noodles, and sat down at a seat by the window. I don't know what happened, but since I sat down, my right eyelid kept twitching. As the saying goes, the left eye jumps into wealth and the right eye jumps into disaster. I was also getting more and more confused. I always felt that the matter of the proprietress was too outrageous. How could a person who had been dead for 3 months appear in front of me and even ask me to open a room? The most frightening thing is that she died in the room I rented, but I have never heard anyone say that someone died in that room. When I think of these things, I feel my scalp tingle, so I simply don't think about it. I pick up my phone and play games. After a few minutes, the noodles were served, and I took a few bites when my phone rang. It was a text message with a number I didn't recognize, but the content was a bit inexplicable. Don't go back to your room tonight, or your life may be in danger. My heart beat violently, and I almost lost my phone in fright. It took me a while to get over my senses. It was a hell of a fucking day. I didn't even think about it again. I paid the money and walked out of the noodle shop. My right eyelid twitched even more, as if someone was pulling my eyelid. Thinking wildly, I suddenly saw a little girl with a doll on the left walking towards the middle of the road. My heart skipped a beat, and I shouted a few words, but the traffic was too loud, and the little girl was a certain distance away, so she couldn't hear her at all. Seeing that the little girl was about to walk into the middle of the road, I was in a hurry. There was nothing I could do. I ran to the little girl with my legs free. To tell the truth, I didn't want to be a hero, let alone plan anything, just simply want to save the little girl. I remember that the last time I ran like this was in junior high school. It was for a competition, and my legs hurt all afternoon, but this time it was different. I was saving lives. Seeing that it was too late, the little girl turned her head to look at me at this time, and smiled at me. I wanted to remind her to avoid it, but it was too late. A car drove over from the left side of the little girl. The girl was knocked into the air and fell to the road. Now there are some guardrails and flowers and plants on both sides of the road. The little girl lost her vision all of a sudden. I watched the vehicle that caused the accident escape from under my eyes, but there was no way. Remember the license plate number. If something happens to the little girl, I will call the police immediately, and I cannot just let the perpetrators go unpunished. I ran a few steps in a hurry, and when I came to the place where the little girl was hit, I was stunned on the spot, because there was no little girl here, but a white doll lying quietly in the middle of the road. I took a few steps back, wondering if my eyesight was wrong. Shaking my head, I saw that it was indeed a half-sized white doll. This doll was of a very old style. I remember seeing it a few times when I was a child, but now I don't see it at all. I rubbed my numb legs. Maybe I was really dazzled. But on second thought, that's pretty good, isn't it? Better than having a little girl lying there, right? After rubbing my legs for a while, I felt better, at least not shivering anymore. Suddenly, a hand was placed on my shoulder, and it was a little girl, dressed in white, about 7 or 8 years old. Wait a minute, isn't this the little girl I saw just now? My head buzzed. Why did this little girl emerge from behind me? I rubbed my eyes and looked at the little girl, always feeling something weird. The little girl also looked at me with a pure face, without blinking her eyes. To be honest, the little girl is quite cute, especially her eyes are watery, but they are a little white, as if she has leukemia, and the doll in her hand is a bit old. Seeing the doll in the little girl's hand, I will never sit down again. I can't help it anymore, because I remember that the doll was still lying in the middle of the road just now. I swallowed a mouthful of saliva, thinking about the situation where the little girl was hit just now. I was very panicked. Is this little girl a human or a ghost? It won't hit the unclean, right? I also half believe this ghost hitting incident, half believe because I've heard it mentioned before, it doesn't seem like it's made up, and half believe it's because I haven't encountered it since I grew up. I was beating my heart, silently chanting the blessings of the Buddha, don't really bump into something unclean, and fortunately it was broad daylight. If it was late at night, I might really think it was something dirty. The little girl blinked her eyes, looking very innocent, and said in a low voice, "My mother doesn't want me anymore. Can I follow my brother in the future?" I exhaled. Hearing this sound is quite normal. Maybe it's just my imagination. Are you scaring yourself? No matter what, I have to calm down. I forced a smile and asked the little girl in a low voice why her mother didn't want her anymore. The little girl paused for a few seconds, then shook her head, looking depressed. Maybe the little girl was playing outside alone and couldn't find the way home. I touched the little girl's face, thinking that I couldn't ignore it, so I agreed to the little girl and let her follow me until I found it in the afternoon. Let her mother talk. I'm just joking, I'm afraid that something will happen if the little girl runs around. The little girl was very happy to hear that, and she wrung her fingers seriously. I was a little puzzled, I didn't know what she was doing. After a while, the little girl looked up and said to me, "Brother, are you really well? For 12 years, no one has paid me any attention." When I heard it, I was a little confused. 12 years. This little girl is probably only 7 or 8 years old. I was apprehensive for a while. I looked at the girl blankly and wanted to swallow, but my throat was dry. At this time, I also noticed something strange. The little girl, there is no shadow behind. My head buzzed again, half of my body was numb, and my back was sweating. Only then did I realize that people who came and went would look at me, and the eyes just didn't understand what I was doing squatting. It seemed that the little girl couldn't see it. It's like... I panicked. Could it be that the little girl is a ghost? The little girl looked at me, said she would follow me from now on, and stretched out a pale right hand to touch me. I shivered all over my body. I wanted to back up but found that my legs were numb. I don't know if it was because I was scared or I squatted for a long time. "Xiaoqin, what are you doing here?" Suddenly, someone called me. The voice seemed to have been heard somewhere. I was overjoyed. Isn't this the boss? It's too timely. If I can move now, I will definitely jump up and kiss the boss a few times. I have never felt that the boss is so good. Tears will flow out. The little girl glanced at the boss, then at me, then slowly retracted her hand, feeling a little disappointed, and said to me, "Brother, then I'll go first." The little girl hugged the doll, bowed her head and walked away step by step. I took a long breath and sat down on the ground, more tired than a fight. The boss just came over from behind, patted me on the shoulder, and said, "What's wrong with me?" I was panting heavily, wanting to say that I saw something unclean, but somehow I stopped when I reached my mouth. I thought it was better to forget it. I don't intend to say anything about the proprietress, after all, I don't know, so let's put it aside for now. After a while, I broke out in a cold sweat, and my mouth was so dry that it was worse than being thirsty for several days. I was just scaring the little girl. The boss said, "Xiaoqin, are you sick?" I shook my head and said it was fine. The boss didn't ask any more questions, and chatted for a while. He said he was busy going back to the company first, and he didn't urge me to go to work before leaving. I nodded. My legs are still a little weak now, it seems that I need to rest for a while. After the little girl's troubles, I kind of believe the master's words. The proprietress may really be dead. The previous proprietress is probably not human, but I always feel a little strange. I suspect that it's not because of my bad luck. This thing came to me. Suddenly, the phone rang, and it was the landlady calling. I thought to myself that the rent and everything had been paid, so what else could I do? I answered the phone, and just put it to my ear. I heard the landlord's side was noisy and chaotic, mixed with sounds like electric current from time to time. I talked several times over the phone, but no one spoke to the landlord. I wonder if the signal on her side is not good. I pressed the phone directly and sent a text message, and within 3 seconds, the landlady came back. "Where are you? Come back quickly, you have something in your room." I'm a bit baffled, and I don't know what the landlord is talking about. After a few seconds, the landlord sent another text message, "Come back quickly, I'm afraid. I think there is a thief. This landlady is stupid, won't she call the police?" I cursed in my heart. Today is not an ordinary back at all, first bumped into that thing, and now there are thieves stealing things? Bad luck is not so sad. Before I had time to think about it, I dialed the number of the master, talked about the situation, and said that I would return to the company later. Put the little girl's one aside beforehand. I know I need to find someone who knows how to do it for me to take a look at it. The most urgent thing now is to go back and catch the thief. And I also want to go back and ask the landlord if someone really died in that house 3 months ago. I bounced on the spot for a few times, and my legs got better before I went to take the bus. After getting on the bus, I vaguely heard a little girl's voice, which seemed to say, "Brother, don't go." I looked outside suspiciously, only to see a little girl staring at me from the car window with a look of reluctance, and that girl was the one I saw just now. My scalp was numb, and fear rushed into my heart in an instant. The little girl said she would follow me, maybe she was entangled with me, and she kept thinking in her heart not to follow, not to follow. The only good thing is that the bus started and there were many people on board. The little girl stood there, staring at me without blinking, and didn't seem to be chasing after me. I took a long breath, and I broke out in a lot of cold sweat for just a few seconds. Anyway, I'd better go back and look at it first. See what's going on in my room. Soon, I got off the bus and ran quickly. After a while, I arrived at the place where I lived. I opened the door, walked straight for a few steps, and then turned right to a dark corridor. Even in broad daylight, the corridor the inside is also dark and a bit scary, and the last one in the corridor is my room. I looked the same as usual. I didn't look like a thief. What kind of joke is the landlord doing when he has nothing to do? Just thinking about it, suddenly a hand stretched out in front of my eyes, covering my chest mouth. A female voice rang in my ears. "Don't make a sound, come here quickly." My body trembled, and I almost cried out. At first glance, the hand that I thought was a little girl followed. I nodded quickly, and the person behind me let go of me. I turned around and saw that it was the landlady. I rubbed my chest and leaned against the wall to breathe heavily. It's not that I'm timid. In just 1 hour, the proprietress first, and then the little girl, anyone would get nervous. The landlady didn't speak, as if she had something to hide. She glanced at the corridor with taboo, grabbed my arm and walked upstairs. "I said you, and I wanted to ask you what you were doing." As a result, the landlady jumped up and pressed me against the wall all at once, covering my mouth tightly with both hands. This was so sudden that I didn't have time to guard against it. The back of my head hit the wall with a bang, which made me dizzy. I was a little angry and wanted to push the landlady away, but saw the landlady's face was pale, and he kept giving. I winked, and that direction was in the corridor. "Is there something wrong in the corridor?" I didn't take a closer look, and nodded first, motioning for her to let me go. The landlady let go of me without saying a word, and then pulled me up the stairs. Before going up the stairs, I glanced curiously at the corridor, but I didn't know if I was wrong or what. Things are wriggling. Boom! The landlady pulled me to her room, closed the door, and sat down on the sofa without even noticing that a large piece of my chest was exposed. I rubbed the back of my head, looked at the landlady and said, "What's the matter, the gods and gods in broad daylight?" The landlord's complexion was not very good, and his body was shaking all the time. "I wonder what's the matter, it scares people like this." "I'm not in a hurry, I'll wait until she breathes a sigh of relief." She took a sip of water and was silent for a while, looking much better. The landlady looked at me and whispered, "Has anything strange happened to you recently?" I felt something was wrong. She had something to say. "When it comes to strange things, that is, the proprietress and the little girl, my heart beats and my face is not very good." Seeing that something is wrong with me, the landlady asked again in a low voice. "I don't think I can hide it, so I might as well admit it." I swallowed my saliva, nodded my head. It was a tacit consent. Her complexion became worse all of a sudden, her lips turned purple, she kept mumbling, "She was broken, she got dirty." When I heard it, what the hell? Could it be that the landlady also saw the proprietress and the little girl? Or has someone really died in this room? The landlord was trembling all the time, and kept saying, "There is someone in your room, no, there is a ghost." I couldn't sit still, and asked her if a woman died in this room 3 months ago. The landlady shook her head and kept saying she didn't know. I asked the landlady to tell me what was going on, and she regained her composure before telling me in a hesitant manner. Just as she was going out and passing the corridor, she heard the sound of a baby crying, very softly. She also felt strange, because I was the only tenant in this corridor, and I still went to work during the day, so how could there be the sound of a baby crying? The landlady came to the door and burst into a heart-piercing cry. The sound still came from my room. The landlady also felt that something was wrong, so she called to tell me. I'm a little nervous, and I swear that when I leave in the morning everything will be fine and there will be no hiding any babies or any pranks. The landlady didn't speak, and was in a daze on the sofa, not knowing what she was thinking. I sat down and thought, what is going on here? In a short period of time, first the dead proprietress asked me to open a room, and then the little girl, who had been dead for 12 years, said she would follow me, and now there was even the cry of a baby in my room. I'm also guessing, and I'm not entirely sure that's the case. Maybe there is a reasonable explanation for all of this. I thought to myself that if it doesn't work, I'll go to the room to have a look. If something is wrong, I will completely believe in the existence of ghosts in this world. At this moment, the landlady spoke, in a low voice. I moved a little closer, trying to hear what she was saying. I couldn't sit still anymore, thinking that there must be that thing in my room. As the saying goes, there is no traitor and no business. When I came here, the landlady told me that there are generally few tenants in this area and the houses are relatively cheap. I believed it. Now she said that, it is not like that at all. It's not that there are few tenants here, but that there are no tenants who dare to rent, because people have really died here. The landlady spoke very vaguely, saying that more than 3 months ago, there was a tenant here, a girl in her 20s who was pregnant and died inexplicably. This is nothing, the strange thing is that the child in the stomach is gone. It must be that after the news got out, no one dared to come here to rent a house. I was also a newcomer, and I lived here because the rent was cheap. From the landlady's words, I can't tell whether the dead woman is the landlady. But to be honest, if the landlady told me about this in the past, I would at most sneer at him twice. What kind of society is this? Do you still believe this? But now if I say that I don't believe it, I'm deceiving myself and others. The landlady said, "There is a baby crying in your room, maybe it has something to do with what happened 3 months ago." I could see that the landlady was very scared. When she was talking, the hand holding the cup kept shaking. It also has a huge head. Could it be that this series of things is really aimed at me? Now that I think about it, I feel a little strange, let alone why the dead proprietress asked me to open a room. Why was that little girl the only one I saw? Could it be that you showed it to me on purpose? But it's not true. The landlady said that the pregnant girl died 3 months ago, but I was still studying in Tianjin 3 months ago, so I might not come here to rent a house. It's a bit of a mess. Wait, that text message. I remembered, I received a text message at lunch, telling me not to come back at night, or my life would be in danger. So did the guy who texted me know there was a weirdness in my room? I just realized, it wasn't a prank. It's reminding me. I reached into my pocket, took out my phone, and slid to unlock it, but what was displayed on the screen was not the wallpaper I usually made, but a rag doll with a few large characters printed on it, "Brother, go." I yelled, my scalp was about to explode. I felt that the room became extremely horrifying. It was the little girl who followed me, and she was entangled with me. I remember she said that she would follow me, but I didn't think so at the time, but I actually agreed to her, and now I really regret it. When I was young, I heard people say that if someone calls your name in the middle of the night, don't say yes, or you will lose your soul, because the person who calls you may not be a person. I felt that something similar happened to me. The little girl made a request, and I vaguely agreed, and then the little girl clung to me, of course. Regarding these, I don't know if there are some sayings, but now when I encounter this, I just feel horrified. I subconsciously threw away the phone, not daring to look at those words, for fear that the image of the little girl would appear in front of my eyes in a second. The landlady was taken aback, looked at the mobile phone still on the ground, saw that my expression was wrong, and became even more frightened, and whispered, "What's wrong?" I don't know how to tell her, and it's useless to tell her, it will only make her more scared, so I just shook my head pretending to be calm. While I was not paying attention, the landlady picked up my mobile phone from the ground, and it was too late for me to stop it. The landlady looked at the phone, her face changed suddenly, she screamed, and jumped on me, the phone fell on me again, and the next moment, there was a voice that made me almost collapse, "Brother, go away." The landlady couldn't take it any longer, she started crying, her body was shaking non-stop, and she kept talking about ghosts. I managed to break free, grabbed my phone and smashed it to pieces. The little girl's voice disappeared, and I exhaled, trembling uncontrollably. The landlady's face turned pale, and she curled up on the sofa in shock, her tight skirt retreated to her thighs, and she didn't even notice that her panties were exposed. I found a piece of clothing and quickly covered her. I sat on the sofa, growled a few times, my heart was in a mess, the little girl was sure it was a ghost, and she was stalking me. I didn't know what to do, I was really scared, my body was trembling uncontrollably, I pinched my thigh, and warned myself to be calm. I started to recount what happened today. When I got up in the morning, there were some black handprints on the door, and then I went to work, and I collided with an old man on the way to work. By the way, that old man, I remember that the old man was very strange at that time, a little inexplicable, he said nothing, he was tainted with yin qi or something. Now that I think about it, the old man may have seen some tricks, but why didn't he tell me? Is it really like what he said, I'm really going to die? Even if I say it, will I be finished? Regardless of the proprietress, I received a text message at noon, telling me not to go home at night. Judging from the current situation, is it to save me? So the person who sent the text message knew there was something weird in my room, but I had no idea who was texting me. And, no, boss lady. I suddenly thought of something. I always preconceived that the proprietress was dead, so I thought it would be no good for her to approach me, but I just ignored what she said. The proprietress also said one thing, that is, that I will not be allowed to go back tonight. Thinking about it this way, I am also surprised. Why did the proprietress show up today after I have been here for several days? Could it be that the proprietress is also aware of the weirdness in my room and won't let me go back? If I hadn't asked the master a lot, I might have gone to open a room with the proprietress if I was really stupid. As for the little girl, maybe she was shown to me on purpose, but what purpose does she have? Why does she think 100% that I will save her? Where is she now? Keep telling me to go quickly, where is it telling me to go? All of this is like a mystery, lingering in my mind, and I can't figure it out. Just when I was thinking about it, a flash of inspiration flashed in my mind, and I realized an important question. The text message said that it was unknown tonight? And all these strange things also started today. Could it be that today is really an unknown day? I reached out to touch my pocket, trying to get my phone to see what day it was, but the pocket was empty. My brain, I feel like the phone was smashed by me, and it's all turned into parts. I was in pain for a while, and I finally got a clue, and I broke it all at once. I looked around, and I didn't know if the landlady had a wall calendar. I happened to see the landlady's mobile phone on the coffee table. The landlady curled up on the sofa deliriously. I called her, but there was no response. I didn't care so much, so I just picked it up and looked through the calendar. I was also shivering non-stop, and accidentally clicked on the photo album, and I suddenly had the urge to spray nosebleeds. This album is full of nude photos of the landlady in provocative poses. Usually, this would be a huge profit, but I am not in the mood to watch it now, so I quickly quit and searched for a while before I found the calendar. When I looked at the Arabic numerals displayed on the calendar, I shivered all over my body. Today is the 14th day of the 7th lunar month. I often surf the internet and like to watch some supernatural things, so I also know that the 14th day of the 7th month in the lunar calendar means, one day later, it will be Ghost Festival. I can't say anything specific about these. In some places, the 14th of the 7th lunar month is the Ghost Festival, and in some places it is the 15th of the 7th month. Up. I turned off my phone, and I couldn't imagine, could all this really have something to do with the approaching Ghost Festival? At this time, for some reason, something came to mind, and suddenly, I felt like I was about to suffocate. 3 years ago, on the 14th day of the 7th month of the lunar calendar, my grandfather passed away, and today, unfortunately, is the 3rd anniversary of my grandfather. I sat on the sofa blankly, my head was in a mess. I don't know if my grandpa's death just happened to have some connection with today, but the few words my grandpa mentioned before he died, I believe it is definitely not a so-called coincidence. I slapped myself hard twice, and I felt a burning sensation on my face, which made me calm down a lot. I tried my best to recall the details of 3 years ago, maybe it would help me. I remember that day, not long after the early morning, my uncle came to my room in a hurry, told me that my grandfather was dying, and told me to go quickly. When I arrived at Grandpa's room, I saw Grandpa lying on the bed with 3 people standing beside him. I still remember it vividly. One of them is my second grandfather, so I won't mention it. Although I don't know the other 2, they have their own characteristics. Their body shapes are very different. One is fat and the other is thin. Looks a few years younger than the second grandfather in age. The second grandpa waved his hand when he saw me coming in, and let the 2 people and the uncle go out. When I came to the bedside, my body shook when I saw Grandpa's appearance. Grandpa's entire face was swollen, his lips were purple, and his eyes were turned upside down. To be honest, I don't know how this happened. I remember that Grandpa has always been fine. The second grandpa whispered a few words in Grandpa's ear, nodding from time to time, but I didn't hear what Grandpa said. After a while, the second grandpa stood up and told me that Grandpa had something to tell me, so let me get closer. I squatted down and saw that Grandpa's lips were already moving. It was something he said to me. I quickly put my ear to it and heard a few words, such as July, heaven, 100 ghosts, etc. I was a little unclear by, when I wanted to ask again, I found that Grandpa was out of breath. I called Grandpa a few words in a low voice, swallowed hard and began to cry. The second grandpa also knelt down, yelled Big Brother, and cried on the edge of the bed. I don't know how long it took until someone patted my shoulder. When I got up, I saw that it was the uncle, and told me to go out, saying that the second grandpa was looking for me. Only then did I realize that the second grandpa had already gone outside at some point. I looked at the back of second grandpa, and didn't know what to say, but second grandpa said to me first, July is unknown, if you encounter strange things in the future, tell your uncle as soon as possible, otherwise there will be danger. After the second grandfather said this, he went back to the room. I don't understand why the second grandfather said that. At that time, he thought that the grandfather died, so he said that July is unknown. Now it seems that the second grandfather knew that I would encounter these things. Thinking of this, I was trembling all over. Grandpa mentioned July, 100 ghosts, and the sky. July must be the middle of July. 100 ghosts reminded me of the night walk of 100 ghosts, maybe tomorrow, what about day, I don't know what it means. The second grandfather even told me clearly that he should contact my uncle as soon as possible. But I dropped my phone, and I didn't remember my uncle's contact information. It was impossible to make a call. I checked the time and it was only 1 o'clock. There was still time to go home, so I had to go home, otherwise I might die. By the way, at this moment, I have completely believed that there are gods and ghosts in this world. Boom, boom, boom. I was about to get up and leave, when suddenly, someone knocked on the door. I was immersed in the memories. This sudden shock startled me. I took a deep breath, thinking to myself that this is the middle of the day, and I don't know who will come. But when I saw the landlady lying on the sofa in a daze, her clothes were disheveled, the covered clothes fell off, and her white buttocks were exposed. No matter how you look at this scene, it looks like I drugged and raped the landlady. Look. I hurriedly picked up my clothes and covered them up, thinking that I had no shame in my heart, but how could I explain it to others? After hesitating again and again, I became cruel. It's already this time, why do I care about this? I love whoever I love, but I didn't do anything anyway, so I have nothing to be afraid of. I made up my mind to open the door. As soon as I grabbed the doorknob, I heard a call from outside the door, brother, open the door. I was completely pissed off. Isn't this voice the little girl I bumped into? Why did her voice sound outside the door? I backed away in fright. It was the little girl who followed me, and the little girl showed me the text message on purpose. I was about to suffocate. Every time the door knocked, my heart was trembling, my heart was about to beat out. With a squeak, the door opened. A pale little hand slowly stretched in. I squatted down on the ground, looking in horror at the door that was still slowly opening. My spirit was almost on the verge of collapse. Only now do I know what mental torture is. Far more painful than physical pain. How much I wish I had a knife in my hand, and then stabbed into my temple crazily, just like in the Midnight Bell. Sadako was approaching step by step. The two girls couldn't bear it mentally, and shot themselves. I also experienced that what does it feel like ultimate fear, fear worse than death. The door was completely opened, and a 7 or 8-year-old girl appeared, holding a half-sized doll in her arms. I looked at the little girl, with my mouth wide open, unable to say anything. My consciousness was about to blur. I know, maybe I am about to die. I'm so scared to death. Brother, I won't hurt you, you trust me. The little girl spoke, feeling very wronged, almost crying. At this moment, it was as if someone had punched me hard in my heart. The fear was gradually dissipating, and my consciousness regained consciousness. My heart trembled violently again, and I actually felt a little bit sorry for the little girl. I don't know what's going on, and I don't know if the little girl forcibly interfered with my emotions, which made me less afraid and a lot more rational. I can't express this feeling in words, but I know that I really walked through the gate of hell just now. After taking a few breaths, I suddenly thought about it. Wouldn't the worst result be death? What am I afraid of? The little girl is determined to kill me. What can I do? After I figured it out, I got up and felt a coolness between my legs. I looked down, and I was so scared that I peed because I didn't feel it just now. Before I could be embarrassed, a cold hand rested on my wrist. Seeing that the little girl had arrived, I swallowed unconsciously. Although I was a little apprehensive in my heart, I stubbornly stared at the little girl. The girl's eyes are not as scary as I imagined, but very clear. The little girl turned around and pulled me away. I almost fell down. I didn't know that the little girl was so strong, but I just pulled it casually, and my arm felt like it was going to be pulled off. The little girl didn't care at all, so she lifted me out of the door abruptly, and then threw me hard. I felt like I was flying up, and fell to the ground with a plop. My back hurt from the fall, and I swear, this is too bullying. I just got up and was about to say a few words, when I saw the little girl standing at the door smiling at me, passing by the little girl. Behind her was pitch black, the ground and the walls seemed to have been dyed with ink. I took a closer look, horrified in my heart, and felt horrified again. The prints on the ground and the walls were clearly black handprints, swallowing half of the corridor. After a while, the landlady and I would both let this ghost handprint swallow it up. Isn't that the handprint I saw on my door when I went to work early in the morning? What the hell is going on? I figured it out all at once. The little girl kept telling me to go, she was saving me. There was a real problem with my room. Woohoo! Suddenly, there was a crying sound, like a baby crying. What the landlady said was true, she didn't lie to me, that black handprint. I can't imagine. The little girl urged me to leave quickly again. I came back to my senses and wanted to run away, but I left. What should the landlady do? After hesitating for a moment, I saw a ghost handprint abruptly printed on the little girl's doll. The little girl's face changed suddenly, she groaned, her body swayed, and she almost fell down. I became inexplicably nervous. But at this time, the baby's crying became louder, as if it was full of resentment, and it was creepy to hear. But the little girl was smiling, I saw it, and felt inexplicably distressed. Maybe I'm afraid that the little girl will also be swallowed by that ghost's handprint, although I don't know why. I signaled the little girl to come quickly. The little girl's eyes lit up, and she smiled innocently. Just after taking 2 steps, 2 ghost handprints appeared on the little girl's feet, also fell to the side. The little girl lay on the ground, her facial features were distorted, and my heart felt as if it was being cut by a knife. The little girl did this for me. Whether she is a ghost or not, she is still a child. I couldn't control it anymore. I took a step forward and rushed towards the little girl, a few steps away. Within a second or two, I arrived, picked up the little girl. Huh? Why is it so light, like holding a ball of air? I don't know where she got the strength to throw me out just now. Before I had time to think about it, I hurried back to the landlady's room. There were ghost handprints on the wall. The landlady would definitely not be spared after a while. When I saw that the landlady was still asleep, it was really I want to slap her white ass twice. Woohoo! The baby's cry became louder, as if it was attached to my ear. At this moment, without considering the difference between men and women, he stepped forward and hugged the landlady's body, and put it on his shoulders. At this critical moment, his body did not know where the strength came from, and he carried the landlady on his back and rushed upstairs. Fortunately, the little girl was very light, otherwise I couldn't bear the weight of the two of us. When I first arrived downstairs, I almost stopped and threw the landlady out. The whole first floor became extremely dark and covered with ghost handprints. It's this ghost handprint. I took a deep breath and comforted the little girl not to be afraid. Seeing that the only way out was about to be swallowed up by the handprints of ghosts, I tried my best. I roared and ran forward, my heart was about to fly out of my throat. What is this handprint? But seeing the pain on the little girl's face, she knew it was not to be touched. I felt that my legs were going numb, and it was going to be too late. When I was 1 meter away from the gate, I jumped with all my strength, and jumped up against the landlady. The little girl hugged me tightly, not daring to let go. I kept thinking of Amit Babuda in my heart. I simply closed my eyes and resigned myself to fate. In the next second, a piercing pain ran from my calf to my mind. I gasped and almost fainted. I jumped up and landed with a person on my shoulders. I really doubted it. Am I broken? I couldn't control my body anymore. I fell forward suddenly, and the landlady flew out, but I couldn't control it anymore. I did what I could. As for what would happen later, I was resigned to my fate. I gasped again, and my body felt like it was going to fall apart when I fell on the ground. I wondered, what happened to the soft feeling coming from my face? Did I lose consciousness because of the fall? I opened my eyes and almost sprayed it. A pink panty came into view. I took a closer look. Isn't this the landlady? I just happened to be lying between her legs, and this posture is too inappropriate for children. If this eclectic scene were normal, I would not be able to hold it anymore, but today even if the model is standing here naked, I have to save my life. As soon as I wanted to get up, a snow-white foot kicked over. Before I could react, my eyes went dark, and the foot was printed on it. Immediately, I unconsciously gave a thumbs up in my heart, giving this foot a kick. With a full score, this Neema's kick is comparable to the big kick of the national football team, and it is too strong. I turned over and almost passed out. I vaguely heard a rogue. It was the landlady who woke up suddenly. At this moment, she rubbed her body and looked at me angrily. I also became angry, and when I got up enduring the severe pain, I slapped the landlady on the face. "Are you crazy?" I yelled loudly, which startled the landlady. She covered her face and dared not speak, and she was about to cry. I was lazy to explain, but I didn't have time to explain. I really suspect that the landlady is also stupid, forgetting everything after sleeping. The crying of the baby became quieter, but it could still be heard vaguely. I grabbed the landlady's arm and picked up the little girl with the other hand, and ran away, gasping for air in pain every time I took a step. The landlady must have frightened me. She covered her face and didn't speak, and let me run away. After a few seconds, her face changed, as if she remembered something. She glanced behind her door, and this time it was too late. "You don't need to drag me, just run around like crazy on your own." When she ran and swung her hand, she almost knocked me down. I cursed secretly, enduring the severe pain, and followed behind the landlady. I hurried forward and grabbed the landlady's arm, signaling that it was okay, and stopped quickly. Otherwise there would be so many people on the street, they would think I had done something to her. I put down the little girl, and sat on the street gasping for breath without caring about my image. I couldn't stand up anymore after sitting. The severe pain from the soles of my feet and calves made me unbearable. When I pulled up my trouser legs, I saw that my calves were all red and swollen. The little girl squatted aside and watched and said, "Brother, it's my fault." I was about to cry as I said that. I quickly smiled and said, "It's okay, my little sister doesn't cry." The landlady was also exhausted, but at least she didn't lose her mind. She looked at me in surprise and asked me who you were talking to. It just occurred to me that the little girl is invisible to others. I shook my head and said it was nothing, otherwise I told her that there was a ghost next to her. Wouldn't it scare her to death? The landlady only remembered a short paragraph. After she lost her mind, she didn't know what happened. However, the landlady is not stupid and knows that I saved her. The landlady squatted in front of me apologetically, looked at my legs, and asked me if I was okay. I glanced at the landlady angrily, and said that it was not to save you. The landlady was even more embarrassed after hearing this, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't blame the landlady anymore. Seeing the 5 red fingerprints on her fair face, I felt a little apologetic. It was too ruthless, but when I thought of that kick, I felt the atmosphere in my heart, so I thought it was even. I said, "Go back to the company with me first, you can't go back there now. I'm mainly worried that the ghost's handprint is still spreading, but it's useless to worry." The landlady paused, then said she was sorry, and explained that she opened her eyes and saw me lying between her legs, and thought she was molesting her. I also understand, shook my head and said nothing. After resting for a few minutes, I was about to get up and leave. The little girl grabbed me and said she couldn't walk. I saw the ghost handprints on her feet. Maybe it was because of this that the little girl couldn't walk. I couldn't help picking up the little girl, and it wasn't convenient to ask anything now, so I had to give up. Anyway, at least it's okay now. Along the way, the landlady supported me and got on the bus again. Many people looked at the two of us in surprise. I knew that my face must not look good now. I was kicked so firmly, and I was satisfied without deforming. As for the landlady, half of her face was swollen. At first glance she thought we were a young couple fighting. I didn't say anything, and quickly found 2 seats to sit down. The landlady sat slumped on the seat, her white thighs were exposed, which caused many people in the car to look sideways. I was lazy and hugged her. I picked up the little girl and put it on my lap. I only felt that my body was cold, but I couldn't feel any weight. The little girl looked at me with big eyes, stretched out a pair of small hands to hug me, and said, "Brother, you are so kind, no one has treated me so well." What happened before? The little girl has not been reincarnated, and she has no grievances, which is strange. But I don't understand this, so I'm too lazy to think about it. I let the little girl hold me. If it wasn't for the little girl, maybe I would have died. I looked at the ghost handprint on the little girl's leg, and asked the little girl if it still hurts. The little girl smiled and said that holding her brother will not hurt anymore. I felt sour after hearing this, and always felt sorry for the little girl. The little girl told me not to go at first, and then told me to go quickly. I thought the little girl was stalking me, and I was so scared that I peed my pants. I don't dare to say too much with the next girl. After all, others can't see it, otherwise others will think I am a fool. After about 20 minutes, I pushed the landlady, and got out of the car with the landlady under the strange looks of others. I breathed a sigh of relief. The pain in my leg relieved a lot. There should be no fracture, but my ankle might have sprained, and with the help of the landlady, I limped towards the company. "Brother, I'm afraid." The little girl tugged at me, looking somewhere in horror. I was startled, thinking that the ghost handprint was also chasing me. Following the direction the little girl pointed, I saw a tall woman in red watching me not far away. I almost jumped up. Isn't this the lady boss? Why did it appear here? After all these things, I feel 99% that the proprietress is also a ghost. Could it be that the proprietress is stalking me like a little girl? Seeing that something was wrong with me, the landlady looked at me and said, "What's wrong?" I shook my head and said nothing. "Let's go. I don't want to be involved in anything else." After walking for a few minutes, I saw the company, and saw Lee Ran coming out of the company door, probably pouring water. I yelled in a hurry. Lee Ran looked around suspiciously, finally saw me, and ran over in a hurry. Seeing me like this, Lee Ran couldn't help but became more worried, and kept asking me what's wrong, where did you go? The phone didn't work, and the eye circles were red as he spoke. I have only been with Lee Ran for a few days, and she really treats me as a friend if she can explain this way. I shook my head and said it was okay, and asked if the boss was there. Lee Ran nodded and said, "Yes, we are all worried about you." I was a little relieved, feeling warm in my heart, and walked quickly to the company. Lee Ran looked at me and the landlady suspiciously, but there was nothing wrong. What to ask again? As soon as I went up to the second floor, everyone looked at me in unison. Although I was thick-skinned and a little embarrassed, the boss was obviously surprised and said, "What's wrong?" I was at a loss for words for a while. This matter is not interesting. I made up my mind to go home. Maybe second grandpa knows what to do. I'm here to ask the boss for leave now. I explained my purpose, and the boss was stunned for a few seconds. Seeing that I was so sure, he nodded and agreed. But the landlady didn't say anything and didn't stay. She insisted on following me. The boss and others looked at me strangely. I knew what that meant, especially the landlady's disheveled appearance. It's not normal for others to think about it. Up. But now is not the time to explain. I dragged the boss to the corner, looked at the little girl in my arms, and asked the boss if he knew what happened 12 years ago. I described it again and again, saying it was of the little girl holding the doll. The boss was startled suddenly. His expression was very bad, and he said, "How did you know?" The boss seems to know this reaction, but I dare not say that the little girl is in my arms. I prevaricate and let the boss tell me quickly. The boss took a look before telling me. 12 years ago, a 7 or 8-year-old girl died not far from the company. She was holding a doll in her hand when she died. This was also heard by the boss. As for what exactly happened, he didn't know. I responded and was about to leave. The landlady pulled my clothes and whispered to me, "Could you help me find a pair of shoes?" I saw that the landlady was barefoot all the way. Maybe I didn't notice that the shoe fell off when I was holding her, but it's also fortunate that she was barefoot, otherwise that kick would have kicked me to death. Others naturally heard what the landlady said, and Lee Ran said, "I have a pair, and I don't know if they are suitable." As he said that, he handed over a box. I saw that this was not just bought this morning. I quickly said that the money is mine, and it will be deducted from my salary at that time. Lee Ran smiled and said it was okay. I was very touched. I just came here not long ago. These people are so kind to me. I feel a little sorry. The landlady said thank you, and after a while, she still fit well after wearing it. I thanked again, and when I was about to leave, the boss stopped me again and warned me to be careful, saying that someone had seen that little girl over the years. An expert did some calculations and said that he was looking for a replacement for the dead ghost. When the boss said this, I was a little apprehensive. I looked at the little girl in my arms, but it didn't look like it. I agreed, and the boss is also kind, but I can't tell them what happened just now. It will only hurt them. As soon as I went downstairs and out of the company gate, the little girl suddenly pulled me, hugged me tightly, and said, "Brother, I'm afraid." I touched the little girl's head and asked what's wrong. The little girl pointed behind me without saying a word. I thought something was wrong, and when I turned around, I was startled, and the proprietress appeared again. I swallowed, looked at the proprietress in front of me, and felt a little nervous. The little girl hugged me tightly, her body trembling. Now I'm nervous. If the little girl is scared like this, the proprietress is definitely not human. Maybe she's a ruthless character. The landlady didn't notice anything. She just stared at her face endlessly. I was angry and speechless. What time is this? And I still have the mind to compare, who is more beautiful with him. She looked at me curiously and said, "Do you know this beauty?" I shook my head and winked at her desperately. I just ran out of the haunted house, so I don't know if she can understand what I mean. The landlady was stunned for a moment, and she understood immediately. She hid behind me and pushed me forward a few steps. If I tried harder, I would have to touch the landlady. I was so scared that I jumped up and down, thinking otherwise I would kneel down and beg for mercy. The proprietress ignored me. Instead she looked at my chest endlessly, and her face turned cold. I looked at the little girl in my arms, and thought, could the proprietress also see the little girl? "Do you think you can't even make a ghost?" The proprietress said. It was colder than at noon, and I don't know if it was born. Hearing this, the little girl shook her head in fear, struggling to get down. Before I could react, the little girl fell to the ground. I bent over to hug the little girl. "Brother, don't worry about me." The little girl shook her head in fear and refused to let me touch it. I don't know why, but it must have something to do with the lady boss in front of me. I bit the bullet and asked who you were, but the proprietress didn't even look at me, and said coldly, "The person who saved you." How can I believe this? A person who has been dead for a month said that he came to save me. Do you think I am stupid? I didn't say anything. I bent down to hug the little girl again. The proprietress's face was one side, as if she didn't want me to touch the little girl. She stretched out her hand and pushed me. I lost my center of gravity and fell on my back. The proprietress probably didn't expect me to be so fragile. She gave me a surprised look, and then said coldly to the little girl, "I'll give you a minute to get out of here, or you will be at your own risk." The little girl nodded, not daring to resist. She stretched out her little hand and got up on the ground. I couldn't bear it, got up and almost yelled at the proprietress, "You have the ability to come to me. I know about you. I will not afraid of you." I was apprehensive. The proprietress might not be human. I felt like I was going to die, and I didn't care if the little girl would let her go or not, so I hugged the little girl and comforted the little girl so that she wouldn't be afraid. The proprietress was obviously taken aback, and her tone softened a little, saying that I was doing it for your own good. I just ignored her lazily, turned around and dragged the landlady's eldest sister away. Even if the little girl was a ghost, I would eat the weight and admit it with determination. Besides, I don't even know what's going on with the proprietress, so how could I trust her? The little girl didn't speak, but hugged me tightly with her little hands, still very scared. I don't know if the proprietress followed me. Anyway, I didn't dare to look back. At this moment, the landlady carefully tugged me, and whispered, "Is there something I can't see?" Although the landlady couldn't see, she wasn't stupid. She saw me acting strangely all the way, talking alone from time to time. Just now I had an argument with the proprietress over the little girl, so she must have guessed something. I glanced at her, ignored her, and walked with a limp. I really couldn't hide the matter of the little girl and told her again, otherwise it would only make her more frightened. The landlady didn't ask any more questions and stepped forward to help her. "Look at me and ask me if I feel better?" I nodded and said it was all right. After a while, I came to a bus stop, and the landlady said, "Where is this going?" I told her to take the bus to the train station. She let out an "oh," lowered her head and stopped talking, looking quite disappointed. I can also understand the landlady's mood. Who can feel better after spreading such a mess? But I'm also surprised. Hasn't this happened before? I think there should be none, otherwise the landlady would not have rented the house to me. Although the landlady lied to me, I don't feel bad about her. After about 5 or 6 minutes, a bus came slowly and stopped in front of me. I walked in and saw that there was no passenger inside. It was after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, although it was not the rush hour for getting off work. But there should be more or less some people, which is a bit strange. The driver looked to be in his 40s, but he felt something strange, and without looking at me, he said coldly, "No smoking, no playing with fire." I also know that this bus can be regarded as a public place, and smoking is not allowed. Anyway, I don't smoke, and I don't care too much. After I voted for 2 yuan, I limped to find a seat and sat down. The landlady, he also sat down next to me, looking really tired. The car started slowly, stable but a bit slow. Not long after the start, the landlady shivered and rubbed her arms and said that she was a little cold. I didn't take it too seriously. I thought you only wore one if you didn't count underwear. It was still a hip skirt. It's no wonder it wasn't cold. I closed my eyes and wanted to rest for a while. I was really tired. The landlady responded, and I fell into a drowsy sleep. After an unknown amount of time, I felt someone shaking me very hard. It was the landlady calling me. I thought I had arrived at the train station, so I got up and got off the train. The landlady pulled me over and pointed to the outside with a horrified expression. When I saw it, I suddenly woke up. Where is this? I looked at the weeds growing in front of the mounds outside the car window, and occasionally there were some crooked tombstones, and I was instantly confused. Why did I sleep, and why did the car drive to the mass grave? The next moment, I felt chills all over my body, realizing that this time, I bumped into that thing again. The landlady pushed me down and said in a crying voice, "What should I do now? My head is in a mess, how do I know what to do? I really can't figure out why this is the case. I encounter this kind of thing again and again, and I feel inexplicably irritable." At this time, the little girl tugged me and said to me, "Brother, I have been here before." When I heard this, I felt bad. The little girl came here before. Doesn't this mean that dead people come here? No, if this continues, I might die here too. I got up and went straight to the driver. No matter if he was a man or a ghost, the car had to stop, but when I got there, I was dumbfounded. There is no driver in this seat. There is only a little man made of paper sitting there, his hands and feet are shaking slightly, and his posture is like driving. Then the paper figurine is moving. Suddenly, the paper man seemed to know what I was thinking, tilted his head to look at me, and then, smiled at me. I just felt creepy, it was just too weird, and I suddenly thought that after someone died in the countryside, the relatives would burn the deceased with paper children, cars, and even women. This is probably because I got on a bus made of paper, but I don't know how I got on this dead thing. When I got on the bus, it was obviously driven by an uncle. I hurried back to my seat, looked at the landlady and said, "What's going on? What happened when I fell asleep?" She shook her head vigorously, saying she didn't know. I squinted my eyes for a while, and woke up like this, and then called me quickly. I was a little anxious, and asked the little girl if she knew what was going on. The little girl lowered her head and whispered that Xiaoling didn't know either. I took a deep breath. The little girl is hopeless, she can only rely on herself. If it doesn't work, just jump out of the car. Anyway, this car drives very slowly. If you jump down, you will get scratches at most. If you keep driving like this, who knows what will happen somewhere. Maybe it's the underworld, maybe he just died like this in a daze. As soon as I told the landlady what I thought, the little girl dragged me and told me not to jump, because I would die if I jumped. Then he pointed out the car window to me, and when I looked, there was nothing, and I didn't know what the little girl asked me to look at. The little girl blinked her eyes and said, "There are many people outside." I got up a little bit and looked outside carefully, but I still couldn't see anything except countless cemeteries. I thought to myself, this little girl has been dead for more than 10 years, but she is only 7 or 8 years old. She is still a child when she talks about it. Way to park. I looked around the inside of the car, and it was quite clean, but the more I looked at the color, the more it looked like it was made of paper, and the more it looked like this, the more uncomfortable I felt. When I looked up and saw the 4 eye-catching characters on the roof of the car, I got goosebumps all over my body. Even elementary school students can read these 4 characters. Do not enter the stranger, which means that the living cannot enter. Yes, is it for pulling dead people? I felt chills down my spine and couldn't sit still anymore. I don't know how my landlady and I will die if this continues. As the saying goes, dogs jump over the wall when they are in a hurry, let alone people? I couldn't care less. I walked quickly to the driver's seat, pointed at the paper figurine and yelled, "You bastard, stop for me." The paper man seemed to understand what I was saying, and shook his head at me, which meant no parking. I suddenly became angry, and I don't know where the courage came from. I went forward to grab the paper figurine, yelling, "You bastard, I will tear you up." The landlady also didn't expect me to be like this. She stepped forward and grabbed me to prevent me from taking risks. Who knows what would happen if I tore the paper figurine? The landlady's stop aroused the beast nature in my heart even more. King bastard, I'm not afraid, at worst we'll die together. I yelled and cursed like I was crazy. Although I usually have a good temper and talkativeness, I can do anything when I am in a hurry. I also know that if I die like this, what quality do I talk about? Talk to ghosts. When I scolded, the paper man became even more arrogant, shook his head. It was clearly mocking me. I was suddenly furious, but the landlady hugged me behind me and pulled me hard. I couldn't reach the arrogant paper man for a while. Even though the landlady is a woman, she is really strong. I shook it a few times. Get rid of her. Seeing that there was no way I could do it, my anger surged upwards, and I lifted my foot and kicked it. The paper man didn't kick it, but kicked the steering wheel off. Even I didn't believe it. The power will be so great. I fixed my eyes and saw that the steering wheel had the usual texture. It was clearly made of paper. It was so cold all of a sudden. I calmed down. I was done thinking, how can the bus drive without the steering wheel? But in the next second, I knew I was thinking too much. The bus was still driving steadily. I didn't care about the paper figure anymore. Seeing more and more cemeteries outside the car window, I felt a bad premonition in my heart. Seeing that I had calmed down, the landlady let me go, gasping for breath, and was also very tired. I told her to jump off the car. That's the only way to go. The landlady listened and hesitated, but I didn't urge her. I didn't know what would happen if I jumped down, and I didn't know what would happen if I kept driving. It was up to her to decide. Before the landlady could speak, the little girl in her arms tugged me again, saying that I would die if I jumped off. I glanced at the little girl. She didn't seem to be lying, but when I asked her why, she couldn't tell, and said that there were many people waiting outside the car window. I was a little hesitant for a while. The little girl saved me from the beginning. It is impossible to lie to me. I had no choice but to ask the little girl where the car was going and what would happen if it drove on. The little girl was silent for a while, saying that Xiaoling didn't know where to go, but if this continued, my brother would be like Xiaoling. As soon as I heard it, I was stunned. Like her, isn't it dead? This is death anyway, it's just a matter of dying sooner or later. This undoubtedly declared that I was a dead person. I took another look at the 4 words on the roof of the bus, no one allowed to enter. Maybe I was already dead from the moment I got on the bus. Thinking of this, I was disheartened. I didn't know if I was alive or dead, but either way, I didn't know what to do. The landlady looked at me and said, "Still dancing?" I looked up at her and told her no need, but I didn't tell her the truth for fear that she wouldn't be able to accept it. Seeing me like this, the landlady sat next to me and was silent for a while, asking if she was going to die. The landlady is also a rent collector, and has met many people. I can guess a little about me, a fledgling boy. I don't want to get entangled in this matter, so I forced a smile and asked her if her face still hurts. She shook her head, unable to speak. She's not asking me either, maybe she already knows, and soon, we'll all be dead. After a while, the landlady looked at me and said, "Are you afraid?" I nodded and said that I was going to die. "Can I not be afraid?" She smiled, stretched out her arms and hugged me. I didn't say anything, and let her hug me. I knew this was the last bit of comfort for 2 dying people. The landlady began to talk about her experience in recent years, tired and happy, but she didn't expect to die like this. I sighed. I don't know whether it was she who hurt me or I who hurt her. I thought that's it. It's worth it to have such a beautiful woman by my side when I die. I looked away, but calmed down a lot. At this time, the landlady let go of me, looked at me blankly, and whispered, "Have you ever touched a woman?" I blushed and nodded. I still couldn't let go of this kind of thing. Although it wasn't the first time, I was still very cautious. The landlady smiled, and asked me softly with her lips next to my ear, "Do you want to try it with your sister?" As soon as I said that, I posted the whole person, my soft breasts rubbed against my arms. I am in my 20s, and I only feel the male hormones rushing up. If there is no response, it would be too shameful. To be honest, the landlady is not very beautiful, but she is not bad either. Don't look at 26/7, she reveals the posture of a little woman everywhere, especially her lips, which are very sexy. When I first came here, I felt a little nervous when I saw the landlady. Fucking, I felt itchy in my heart, but seeing the little girl blinking at me and looking at the landlady with a curious expression on her face, I couldn't resist it. It's really worse than death. You are a few years younger than my sister, and you have a good heart. You didn't leave your sister alone. If you don't dislike her, your sister will be yours, and you will have a companion after death. The landlady leaned close to her body, and directly sitting on my legs. It's also lucky that she can't touch the little girl, otherwise it would be really embarrassing. I panted heavily, and stared at the landlady with my eyes straight. The hip-wrap skirt was slowly lifted from bottom to top. I could see her hot body at a glance. After a while, I stretched out my hands and hugged the landlady, and I let go, telling her, "I don't dislike it, it's worth it to have such a beautiful daughter-in-law after death." I really have no relationship with the landlady. I have only been here for a week, and I haven't spoken a few words. If it weren't for what happened today, maybe I wouldn't have any interaction with her in the future. I'm going to die. Only then do I know how good it is to live. The little girl pulled me suddenly. I thought it was the little girl deliberately interrupting my good business, but I didn't respond. But the little girl grabbed me again, pointed to the front and said, "Brother, there are people there." I was shocked immediately. Busily following the direction the little girl pointed at, I saw a person standing not far ahead. This is too weird. The wilderness is full of cemeteries, and the man was standing on a tomb. Getting closer, the man waved to the bus and signaled the bus to stop. I also felt the speed of the bus is really slowing down. I was a little confused, but I immediately felt that something was wrong. There are countless cemeteries outside. Are there still people who can appear here? I hurriedly let the landlady get off my lap, told her to put on clothes, and then looked at the man. To be honest, I started to feel nervous again. For better or worse, it's going to be tense. The bus was getting slower and slower, and finally stopped. The door was just facing the man, and the door opened, but the strange thing was that the man stood still, did not come in for a long time, and did not speak, while the bus had stopped like that and didn't start. I took a look at that person, and I couldn't figure out why he was waving if he didn't get in the car. The little girl flinched in my arms, and gently tugged at me, as if she was very scared. I whispered what was wrong, and the little girl told me that there were many people coming up outside, but the big brother blocked her. I half got up and looked outside, but there was nothing, which was a bit strange. This is not the first time, the little girl said. Is there really something outside that I can't see? I looked at the countless cemeteries outside, and thought to myself that the little girl mentioned were the lonely ghosts here? Maybe this is the only possibility. I was a little scared. No wonder the little girl didn't let me jump off the car. Jumping off would be like jumping into a pile of dead people, but then again, I'll die later. I just don't know how to die. Just when I was thinking wildly, that person got on the bus and walked in. My heart was pounding and I was so nervous that I almost forgot to breathe. Means of torturing me. I didn't dare to speak. I just stared at the person in a daze, feeling a little bit at the mercy of others. After the man got on the bus, it started to move slowly, but it seemed to be not so smooth, and it was shaking a little. What surprised me was that the man found a seat in front of him and sat down without even looking at me. This is a bit different from what I thought. I glanced again, and the man looked very young, about the same age as me. A thought suddenly flashed in my mind. Did he get on this bus somehow? The more I think about it, the more I think it is possible. If so, I must tell him that the bus is terrible, otherwise it will be too late. I made up my mind, but before I got up, the man spoke first, so I sat still. When I heard it, it seemed to be talking to me, but I haven't even opened my mouth yet. How did he know that I was going to get up? The little girl tugged me again and told me in a low voice that the man was scary. I heard what the little girl said, so I just sat there resentfully and didn't move. Anyway, I'm dead, and I can't care about others. I just think that after my death, it will make the second grandpa and uncle very sad. The landlady looked at me, didn't care about the man, put her arms around me again, and said to me, "I will be your wife from now on, and you will be my husband." I think it's a bit funny. I didn't expect the landlady to be so serious. She even thought about saying this before she died. I really can't figure out this woman's heart. I didn't say much, just nodded my head and admitted it. The landlady smiled, put her arms around me and called her husband. I am somewhat helpless. This marriage is more than hasty, it is simply hasty. In a word, I have been privately appointed for life, and I am still in this ghost place, which reminds me of a marriage. The so-called marriage means that a son or daughter dies unexpectedly before getting married. Parents are afraid that the child will have resentment, so they will choose a mate for the child. The uproar, I just understand a little. Having said that, I also have a wife now, and I wanted to continue chatting for a while to cultivate my relationship. I just got tired of a few words, and saw the young man move. The young man grabbed the paper man on the driver's seat in his hand. I was secretly refreshed, and I couldn't help but yelled hello. Who made that paper man so arrogant? But when I saw the young man give me a cold look, I quickly shut up. My heart was pounding. I was afraid that young man ran towards me all of a sudden. Seeing that the young man ignored me, I secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and didn't dare to say anything, watching carefully what the young man was going to do. At this time, the paper figurine was struggling in the man's hand, and made a sound similar to whining, as if begging for mercy. I was a little puzzled. This young man appeared in the cemetery out of nowhere. Did he come here to catch this paper figurine on purpose? Doesn't it mean that this young man might have a way to get us out of here? Thinking about it this way, I suddenly longed to wipe out that paper figurine as soon as possible. No matter whether it can take us out of this ghost place or not, at least it is one step closer to hope. But things backfired. The young man was not in a hurry to grab the paper figurine. He snorted coldly, and said a word to him, saying, "This is too unbelievable. I don't know what to say if I want the paper man to talk. But I don't think that young man's head is so funny. Can someone who can show up here and stop the bus be ordinary?" The landlady poked me and muttered, "What is that man doing?" I gestured for her to stop talking and just watch quietly. After watching it for a long time, I was a little puzzled. The young man stared at the paper figurine and did not speak, while the paper figurine made gestures from time to time. Just when I felt bored, the young man let out a cold snort and muttered. After a few words, he looked very angry, and then he threw the paper man on the cardboard. The paper man caught fire instantly when it fell to the ground, and it burned up, making a "cc" sound, which looked a little weird. Seeing this scene, the little girl yelled, turned her head and buried it in my chest. Her body was trembling. She held me tightly with both hands, and kept saying, "Brother, don't let him take me away." I didn't realize it for a while. I didn't know who was going to take her away, but when I saw the young man walking towards me, I realized that he was the young man in front of me in the little girl's mouth. I was a little scared, but at this time, I was afraid that there would be something wrong, so I simply went all out, stood up, looked at the young man, and said, "What are you going to do?" The young man didn't speak, and looked straight at the little girl in my arms. I swallowed and took a few steps back. With his skill just now, I think it's better to stay away. Seeing me get up, the landlady wanted to stand up too. I yelled and told her to sit still and not let her run into danger, because I didn't know what would happen next. If I died like this unfortunately, I would at least that's what a man should do. At this moment, the car suddenly darkened, and there was a sound similar to howling wind, knocking on the car window, and I subconsciously looked out of the car window. I was almost scared to pee when I saw it. It was me who was ready to face death, and I still panicked when I saw this scene. Outside the car window, I don't know when it was covered with black handprints.